Chapter 1. I've never wished so desperately for my girlfriend to cheat on me. Seriously? My girlfriend, Wu Li, brought a man back to my rented apartment. I stared at the live feed from my security camera, nervous, apprehensive, but mostly expectant. On screen, Wu Li ushered the man onto the sofa and then fetched him a can of ice-cold cola from the fridge. Next, she sat down beside him. The man took the cola but didn't open it. He just set it on the coffee table. After Wu Li sat down, he reached for her hand. After a flicker of hesitation, she didn't pull away, letting him hold it. My eyes widened. I stared unblinkingly at the live feed on my phone screen. Seeing that Wu Li hadn't withdrawn her hand, the man grew bolder, pulling her into his arms. Wu Li seemed surprised by his boldness. Her mouth opened slightly, and a shocked expression appeared on her face. Either she was too stunned to react, or the man's embrace was too tight, but she didn't push him away. "Lily, I like you, I'm crazy about you." Clearly not content with just holding her, and sensing her lack of resistance, the man eagerly leaned in to kiss her. I grew even more tense and more expectant. Was she finally going to cheat? Song Hao don't. However, whether it was guilt from bringing Song Hao back to my apartment and being intimate with him, or genuine affection, her pretty face flushed crimson, and her breath came in short gasps. Song Hao looked embarrassed after being pushed away, but the embarrassment quickly vanished, replaced by a look of deep affection. He looked at Wu Li and said, "Lily, I'm sorry. I couldn't help myself. And ma'am, I know. I don't blame you." Hearing this, Song Hao's face lit up with joy. "But I have a boyfriend, you know that. We can't do this." This was like a bucket of cold water poured over Song Hao, washing away the joy from his face. Staring at the live feed, I couldn't help but sigh inwardly. My anticipation vanished, replaced by a deep sense of disappointment. "Lily, let me tell you something. Don't be angry." "Go ahead," Wu Li replied, looking at him. "That boyfriend of yours doesn't deserve you. Your family is local. You're an only child. His family isn't from here. I don't know his family situation, but he's been working here for 4 years and hasn't bought a house, still renting. I guess his family isn't well off. He can't even afford a house here. He simply doesn't deserve you." "Damn, dude, tell me more. If you can convince her to break up with me today, I'll count out to you 8 times. Chapter 2. Hearing Song Hao's words, my girlfriend Wu Li was silent for a while before saying, "His family situation isn't bad. Although he's not a local, his parents work for public institutions back in his hometown. A dual-income family is already much better off than most." "Have you been to his hometown? Have you met his parents?" Wu Li shook her head and said, "No." Wu Li was telling the truth. She hadn't been to my hometown. However, it was also true that my parents worked for public institutions back home, and that's what I told Wu Li. I wasn't lying. I had previously wanted to take Wu Li home to meet my parents, but later dismissed the idea. She hadn't mentioned it, so I pretended I hadn't thought of it either. It's not that I'm a jerk. There's a reason, which I'll explain later. Right now, watching the surveillance footage is more important. "So, isn't that just him talking nonsense?" Song Hao immediately put on a concerned expression and said, Li, I'm not criticizing you, but you're too naive. You believe everything he says? If I were in his shoes, working and renting an apartment alone in a different city, dating a local, only child girlfriend, I'd definitely exaggerate my family background." Song Hao's concerned expression was definitely fake. What he was trying to do was obvious to everyone. Still, I zoomed in the camera and carefully examined Song Hao's eyes. I wanted to confirm one thing. Did he really think Wu Li was naive? As the saying goes, the eyes are the windows to the soul. A person's facial expressions can be manipulated, but their eyes are hard to fake. Although Song Hao had a concerned look, the cunning glint in his eyes was still visible. Seeing that cunning glint, I breathed a sigh of relief, confirming that Song Hao truly believed Wu Li was naive. Naive means easy to deceive, which also meant Song Hao wouldn't give up until he achieved his goal. He would definitely trick Wu Li into a relationship. Based on my 4 years with Wu Li and my understanding of her, although she wasn't particularly cunning, she was definitely not as naive as Song Hao thought. In other words, even though Wu Li pushed Song Hao away when he tried to kiss her, she actually had the thought. She didn't refuse when Song Hao first touched her hand, and she didn't resist when he hugged her. This already gave Song Hao an opportunity, proving she had the thought. If she hadn't, she would have verbally rejected or even scolded Song Hao when he tested the waters by touching her hand. In fact, if she hadn't, she wouldn't have brought Song Hao back to my apartment. She wouldn't have continued chatting with him after pushing him away when he tried to kiss her without scolding him. Thinking of this, hope reignited within me, and the feeling of disappointment vanished. Really? What you said makes sense. Maybe I should ask him to take me to his hometown to meet his parents and confirm whether he's telling the truth. Song Hao clearly hadn't expected his words to backfire and actually make Wu Li consider this. He was dumbfounded, and after hearing Wu Li's words, I was shocked and gritted my teeth, cursing, "Song Hao, you'd better figure out a way to stop Wu Li from having this idea. Otherwise, if she asks to go to my hometown to meet my parents, I'll kill you." Chapter 3. Song Hao didn't disappoint me. This guy rolled his eyes and immediately said, "Or should I say you're naive? Why are you bringing this up? He should be the one to say it. If he doesn't offer to take you home to meet his parents, it means he doesn't take you seriously. Think about it, isn't that the logic?" It seems like that's the case." Wu Li thought for a moment and said, "Then what do you think I should do?" "You shouldn't do anything. Just see when he'll offer to take you home to meet his parents," Song Hao said decisively. "Besides, you've been dating for 3 years, right? You should set a deadline for him. If he doesn't mention taking you home to meet his parents after this deadline, you should break up with him decisively. Because after such a long time, if he still doesn't take you back to meet his parents, he's simply not sincere with you." Hearing Song Hao's quick-witted remarks, I gave him a thumbs up in my heart and said, "Even I, as a guy, think it makes a lot of sense. You're a damn talent, dude. I'm rooting for you. Go for it." After hearing Song Hao's words, Wu Li didn't say anything but nodded silently. I don't know if she really set a deadline for me in her heart. If I don't offer to take her home to meet my parents by then, she'll really break up with me. If that really happens, I'll definitely kowtow to Song Hao 8 times and thank his 18 generations of ancestors. Let's not talk about this anymore. I'll quickly get the documents, and we'll go back to the company. After saying this, Wu Li went to the workroom in my rented apartment and came out with a folder. Song Hao also stood up, and they walked towards the door together. However, while walking side by side, Song Hao reached out and took Wu Li's hand. Wu Li symbolically struggled a little, but then stopped and let Song Hao hold her hand as they left the apartment. I also turned off the remote monitoring app, put my phone in my pocket, took out a cigarette, and lit it. At this moment, I was in the company's fire escape, sitting on the stairs. I had installed several cameras in my rented apartment, and any activity would trigger a monitoring alert. I kept the cameras a secret from Wu Li, and the purpose of the surveillance was to keep an eye on her, but not to see if she was cheating. What I saw today was really unexpected, but for me it was a pleasant surprise, because I've never so desperately hoped that my girlfriend, Wu Li, would cheat on me really. Or rather, before seeing the scene today, I never thought Wu Li would cheat. It was only after seeing this scene today that I had the desperate hope that Wu Li would cheat. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a pervert. I'm a normal man. No one wants their girlfriend to cheat on them and give them a green hat, and I'm no exception. The reason I desperately hope that my girlfriend Wu Li will cheat on me now is purely out of helplessness. I met and fell in love with Wu Li 3 years ago. When we first started dating, Wu Li was really gentle and tender. I once thought I had found the love of my life. However, the good times didn't last long. Her gentleness only lasted for less than a year before her true nature was completely exposed. Chapter 4. I clearly remember our first fight. It was June 15th, 2 years ago. She asked me to tell her what was different about her that day. I looked her up and down, but couldn't see any difference. Finally, I found out she had bought a new lipstick, a different shade. I'm a man, I don't wear lipstick. How the hell am I supposed to know the difference between reddish brown and mocha brown? Besides, in my eyes, reddish brown and mocha brown are clearly the same color. I simply said, "Aren't those two colors the same?" And she exploded, screaming hysterically, saying that I didn't pay attention to her, that I didn't care about her at all. The thing is, she was clenching her fists and banging them against the wall repeatedly. The force, the sound, it was truly frightening. But at the time, I didn't realize the seriousness of the problem. All I felt was distress, and I quickly apologized and coaxed her until she was happy again. Little did I know, that was the beginning of my nightmare. Or perhaps it's more accurate to say that Wu Li finally began to gradually reveal her true self to me. Even couples, let alone lovers, argue sometimes, right? Naturally, Wu Li and I also had arguments during the 2 years we were together. Her true nature became increasingly clear with each fight, and I grew more and more afraid. Smashing phones and laptops became commonplace. In those 2 years, she smashed 4 phones and 1 laptop, and the reasons for the arguments were ridiculously bizarre. For example, she would fight with me because she was watching a show and I was downloading a game, claiming that my downloading would cause her video to lag and that I wasn't prioritizing her. Or, if we saw a news story and had differing opinions, she would argue with me. Even my preference for casual clothes, while she preferred me in more formal attire, could become a reason for a fight. The key problem was that every time we argued, she would go crazy smashing things, and it got progressively worse. Later, because I was busy with work and replied to her message a little late, she actually came to my office building to confront me, and then proceeded to argue loudly with me right there at the company entrance on the side of the road. Seeing that there was no way to calm her down, and not wanting to make a spectacle of myself on the street, I left her there and walked away. And then she actually laid down in the middle of the road. This wasn't just unbearable, it was also dangerous. She could have been hit by a car. I had to quickly stop traffic while running over to carry her to the side of the road. I let her hit me until she finally calmed down after venting her anger. One day after that incident, I was playing a game while she was taking a nap. Suddenly, she came up to me and started arguing. The reason? She had dreamed that I was cheating on her. The absurdity of the reason aside, I don't know if she had gotten a taste of success from the incident in front of my company, but she became violent with me, biting, scratching, and hitting me like a mad dog. I was truly terrified. This was clearly a sign of violent tendencies. I firmly told her that we were breaking up. She immediately grabbed a fruit knife and slit her wrist. Terrified, I quickly retracted my breakup statement. Chapter 5. It was about 6 months ago that I tried to break up with her. You think things have been calm these past 6 months? Wrong. Dead wrong. She's still been arguing with me this whole time, and there's a new development. No more wrist cutting. She finds it too painful and has switched to jumping off buildings. Don't think I'm joking. She really jumps. That one time, if I hadn't grabbed her hand quickly and pulled her back, she would have jumped out the window. You don't understand. She doesn't slowly sit by the window and threaten to jump. She sprints towards the window like a 100-meter dash and leaps. How dare I gamble on whether she's serious? This is a human life. Besides, we've been together for 3 years. There are feelings involved, right? Also, you heard Song Hao. She's an only child. If something really happened to her, what would her parents do? Burying their own child. Just thinking about it makes my scalp tingle. The most important thing is, I saw a news story. A 22-year-old woman committed suicide by jumping into a lake after a breakup, and her parents sued her boyfriend for $157 million. Guess what the court decided? The court ruled emotional distress, compensation of $200,000. This is a true story. You can search for the news if you don't believe me. Anyway, now it's not even about whether we argue or not. Whenever something doesn't go her way, it's an immediate suicide threat. You dare argue with me? Suicide threat. I hit you, and you dare dodge? Suicide threat. You dare disobey me? Suicide threat. This kind of girlfriend? Take her home to meet my parents? I'd have to be crazy. Otherwise, I will never take her to meet my parents. This isn't a girlfriend. This is a ticking time bomb. About 2 months ago, my company started a new project, and I was assigned to the project team. Because the project was urgent and required fast progress, there was a lot of overtime. Sometimes I worked so late that I just slept at the company. Guess what? I got a call from the police telling me to hurry home because my girlfriend was going to jump off a building. I rushed home and finally managed to talk her down from the roof. I thought, We haven't even argued recently. What's the fuss about? After asking, I found out it was because I'd been working too much overtime recently and hadn't been home often. She felt I was neglecting her, and she was having suicidal thoughts. The police seriously criticized me, saying that even if I'm busy with work, I can't neglect my girlfriend. I was speechless. What could I say? I could only keep assuring the police that this would never happen again. It's a good thing it's the tolerant era now. The police just gave her a talking to. If it were a guy threatening to jump and causing such a commotion, he'd be detained after being rescued. Afterwards, I secretly installed several hidden cameras in the house without Wu Li's knowledge, for fear that she would pull this stunt again. Today, she brought Song Hao back to our apartment, which triggered the camera alerts. I opened the monitor to check, afraid she was causing trouble again, and unexpectedly saw this scene. Chapter 6. Is there any couple that doesn't argue? But Wu Li argues with her life. Who can stand that? Stuck with a girlfriend who's emotionally unstable. No, more accurately, violently tempered, self-harming, and potentially violent, especially in this meta-dominant era. There's simply no way to escape Wu Li. I see no hope whatsoever. After suffering 2 years of mental and physical torment, I'm deeply pessimistic. I once thought this was my life, forever. To put it bluntly, I'd resigned myself to fate. I'd accepted that this was how I'd spend the rest of my days. I'd even considered the worst-case scenario. Marrying Wu Li, never letting her meet my parents, indulging in junk food, smoking, drinking, embracing all the bad habits, and keeping it up long-term, hoping to die early and be done with it. Life is but a few short decades. Just grit your teeth and get through it. As for happiness, I've given up on it in this lifetime. Seeing today's scene, I'm genuinely overwhelmed with joy. It's like manna from heaven. Even a blind sparrow won't starve, as they say. I sat on the stairs, silently smoking. Judging by the situation, this Song Hao is likely Wu Li's colleague. They must see each other every day at work. Should I tail them? Forget about hiring a private investigator. That's only in movies and TV shows. That kind of thing is illegal in our country. Nobody does it. Even if someone was daring enough to take on such a job under the table, the price would be exorbitant, and I couldn't afford it. After much deliberation, I decided to wait and see. Wu Li's behavior today already suggests she has that intention, and Song Hao's actions clearly show he won't give up until he gets her. Furthermore, since Wu Li brought Song Hao back to my rented apartment today, it's bound to happen again. I've already endured 2 years. A little more time won't hurt. I have plenty of patience. After finishing my cigarette, I returned to my workstation and worked through the afternoon. I went home on time after work. Since I rented the apartment, it's naturally close to my company. When I got off work, Wu Li wasn't back yet. The cola bottle was still on the coffee table. I didn't put it away, just sat on the living room sofa, playing with my phone and scrolling through short videos. About half an hour later, Wu Li returned. "You're back." I glanced at her and said, "What do you want to eat tonight?" Although Wu Li and I have been dating for 3 years and living together, neither of us can cook. We usually order takeout. I ordered a large plate of chicken on my way back. "It should be here soon," Wu Li said as she sat down next to me. I kept an eye on her. After she sat down, she noticed the cola she'd forgotten to put back in the fridge. A flicker of panic crossed her face. Then, she acted casually, picked up the cola, opened it, took a sip, and placed it back on the coffee table. She also took out her phone and started scrolling through short videos. I pretended not to see her panic, but inside, I felt even more confident. That flicker of panic meant she still has some shame. And as long as she still cares about her reputation, if she really cheats and I get evidence, the chances of breaking up with her will greatly increase. Of course, this is just my analysis. We'll have to wait and see what actually happens. Chapter 7. Coincidentally, my company recently started a new project, and I was appointed as the project leader. Unlike the last project, which was rushed, this one seemed to have a more reasonable timeline. Still, I told Wu Li about my promotion and that I would be busy. From that day on, even if I had nothing to do, I would come home late pretending that the project required constant overtime. I don't know if Wu Li had already moved on emotionally, or if her thoughts were getting stronger. But this time, My frequent pretense of working overtime and coming home late didn't cause any drama. One afternoon about 2 weeks later, around 4 p.m., the clear sky began to darken from the south. The dark clouds continued to spread northward. The air pressure dropped, making it feel a little difficult to breathe. It was obvious that a heavy rain was coming, but the rain didn't fall until after work. The clouds just grew thicker, the air pressure lower, and distant thunder rumbled. This kind of weather meant the rain would come sooner or later. I wanted to go home early after work, but an issue arose with the project, so I had to stay late with the team. I sent Wooly a message saying I was working overtime tonight and didn't know when I'd be home. If it was too late, I'd just stay at the company. After all, Wu Li and I hadn't broken up, and she hadn't cheated. I still needed to tell her if I might not be home due to overtime. Her family lives locally, and in this weather, with the near certainty of a thunderstorm, she could go home. Her company isn't in the same district as her family home, so it's a bit of a commute. My rented apartment is closer to her work than her family home, which is one reason she moved in with me after we started dating. To my surprise, about 40 minutes later, I received a notification from my security camera. I checked it and saw Wu Li not going home, but returning to my apartment. The project issue needed immediate attention, so I stopped paying attention to her and continued working with my colleagues. Around 9 p.m., almost 10 p.m., the rumbling thunder grew louder and clearer, and the wind picked up. The rain was definitely coming. I told my team members I was taking a break and went outside the company to smoke. The cool, damp pre-rain breeze was much more refreshing than the air conditioning. I lit a cigarette and looked up at the inky black sky. Pitter-patter. Large raindrops began to fall. Then, a purple flash of lightning split the sky, followed by a boom. The thunder was so loud, I felt the ground vibrate. Or maybe it was just my imagination. Lightning flashed and thunder roared. This storm, brewing for so long, probably wouldn't stop anytime soon. I stood at the company entrance, watching the downpour and feeling the rumble of the thunder, when my phone vibrated with another notification. I opened it. It was from the security camera. I immediately opened the app and saw Wu Li, wearing a silk slip dress, opening the apartment door. A man, soaked to the bone, was standing outside. Chapter 8. This man was led into Wu Li's home. It was none other than Song Hao. "What's going on?" Song Hao asked immediately after entering the house and wiping the rain from his face. "In this kind of weather, your boyfriend isn't home with you? Doesn't he know you're afraid of thunder?" "His company started a new project, and he's the team leader," Wu Li said, sounding somewhat aggrieved. "He messaged me tonight, saying there was a problem with the project, and he had to work overtime to fix it. He said he might not come home." Sigh. Song Hao let out a long sigh and said nothing. Seeing Song Hao soaked through, Wu Li hurried to the bathroom to get him a towel. Song Hao took the towel without a word and readily took off his shirt, wiping the rainwater from his body. Wu Li took his shirt and hung it up on a hanger. When Wu Li returned to the living room, Song Hao had already dried himself and thrown the towel onto the sofa. Wu Li looked at Song Hao without speaking, and Song Hao looked at Wu Li without speaking. They were both silent. Suddenly, a purple lightning bolt flashed, followed by a deafening clap of thunder. Wu Li screamed and threw herself into Song Hao's arms, clinging to him. The unsightly scenes that followed need not be described in detail. They went from the living room to the bedroom, and from the bedroom to the balcony. Smoking a cigarette, I watched this scene unfold through the real-time monitoring on my phone. Although my heart wasn't completely calm, I didn't feel much else. Everything was within reason and not unexpected. I let out a long breath, closed the monitoring app, and went back upstairs to work. The home surveillance system not only had local storage but also cloud storage, so there was no fear of losing the files. However, I didn't plan to confront Wu Li immediately because that would be too obvious. After finishing work, I didn't go home but slept at the company. The next day after work, I went home. Wu Li acted as if nothing had happened, as if she had never cheated. 5 days later, I compiled the surveillance video and, after getting home from work, played it for Wu Li. She didn't need to watch to know what happened with Song Hao. She had experienced it firsthand. "You secretly installed surveillance in the house?" Wu Li went crazy and rushed towards the window again, clearly threatening to jump again. I grabbed Wooly, stared intently at her, and said, "Wooly, 3 years of our relationship, and you do this? How could you do this to me? Do you know why I installed the surveillance?" Without waiting for Wooly to react, I said heartbrokenly, "That time you threatened to jump and the police came, they criticized me, saying I wasn't attentive enough to you. I installed the surveillance to prevent you from doing something foolish, not to spy on you." Wooly seemed surprised that this was the reason for the surveillance. After hearing my words, she froze. When I pulled Wooly back from the window, I also felt that this time, her rush towards the window was just for show. It completely lacked the desperation of her previous suicide threats, the kind of force that made her impossible to hold back. "Wooly, if you don't love me anymore, you can tell me. Why did you have to cheat?" I scolded, looking utterly disappointed. "Do you know how much you've hurt me?" Chapter 9. Perhaps feeling guilty, or perhaps having already moved on, Wooly didn't retort this time, but just stood there silently. I berated her infidelity, then tearfully recounted the hurt she had caused me, finally flying into a rage and putting on a show of extreme anger. After nearly an hour of this, Wooly finally spoke. "Let's break up." These 3 words sounded like heavenly music to my ears. I immediately yelled at her, telling her to pack her things and get out, that I never wanted to see her again. Wooly didn't say anything, silently packed her belongings, and left the house with her suitcase. Damn, getting her to say those words was really hard. I almost couldn't keep up the act. Nearly an hour of ranting and raving. I was almost out of words. Life is a stage, and it all depends on acting. After Wooly left, I immediately contacted the landlord, telling them I was moving out, forfeiting the remaining month's rent, and that I would be packing up and leaving that night. I urged them to come and collect the keys as soon as possible. I didn't even want the deposit. Anything I couldn't take with me that night, I was leaving behind. I stayed in a hotel that night and went to the company the next morning to resign, refusing any compensation. Instead of returning home after leaving the company, I went to another unfamiliar city. The first thing I did upon arriving was to change my phone number and cancel all my previous contact information. I wanted to completely disappear from Wu Li's world. I found a new job in this city and worked there for a year before resigning and returning home. Since I had changed my contact information, I naturally had to inform my parents. I kept in touch with them throughout the year, and each time, I subtly inquired whether any of my classmates or friends had gone looking for me back home. Fortunately, my parents always gave me a definite answer. No classmates or friends had gone looking for me. After returning home, I found a temporary job while studying for the civil service exam. My hometown is a small county-level city without many good job opportunities. The civil service exam was the best option. Whether it was because I had gotten rid of Wu Li or simply dumb luck, I passed the exam on my first try. A few days after I started my new job, some of the older colleagues, especially the aunties who were the same age as my parents, began trying to set me up on dates. Having learned my lesson with Wu Li, I was very cautious about this. But I couldn't resist the aunties' enthusiasm, and with my parents also urging me to get married, I started accepting their introductions and going on blind dates. However, I made it very clear to these aunties that regardless of looks or family background, the most important thing was emotional stability and good character. I have to say, introductions from acquaintances are indeed more reliable than finding someone on your own. Annie Wang introduced me to her niece, Wang Shui. Wang Shui's looks were average, but she had very fair skin. As the saying goes, fair skin hides 100 flaws. On a scale of 1 to 10, Wang Shui was at least a 7. Most importantly, Wang Shui was emotionally stable and always smiling, not at all pretentious. Small towns are small, and connections are easily made. My parents made inquiries and found out that Wang Shui's family were decent, well-mannered people. One day, while Wang Shui and I were on a date, I saw a post online and my eyes widened in surprise. Chapter 10. What's wrong? Did you see some shocking news? Take a look. I snapped back to reality and handed my phone to Wang Shui. My phone screen displayed the post I had just been reading. Someone was venting and asking for help. This person said he had a girlfriend named WL, whose personality was extremely volatile. She self-harmed and frequently threatened him with jumping off buildings. Every time they argued, she'd threaten to jump. He lived in constant fear. The key was, he said his girlfriend WL wasn't faking it. She'd sprint towards the window and jump without hesitation. He had endured this mental and physical torment for over a year and felt like he was about to collapse. He was asking everyone for advice on how to break up with her. To be honest, when I saw that his girlfriend's initials were WL, I immediately thought of Wu Li. However, I didn't think it would be such a coincidence. I even thought back to the day I escaped from Wu Li's city. After resigning from my company, I was so judong internally that I even wanted to find Song Hao and thank him face to face. I wanted to thank him for his generous help when I was in despair, for giving me a way out and saving my life. But he was Wu Li's colleague, and I was afraid that if I went to thank him, I would run into Wu Li. That's why I suppressed my excitement and the idea at the time. This Song Hao's girlfriend seems to have some mental issues, right? What? How do you know his name is Song Hao? But I have a boyfriend. You know that. We can't do this. Just married. Wang Shui leaned closer to me and pointed to a comment below, saying, "This comment says he deserves it. He stole Wu Li from her boyfriend." Sure enough, I followed Wang Shui's finger and saw that there was indeed a comment saying that. I couldn't help but sigh inwardly. The world is big, yet so small. To actually see the latest news about Song Hao and Wu Li so coincidentally. Song Hao, oh Song Hao, my friend, I can only silently pray that someone will steal Wu Li from you too. I thought to myself, if that doesn't happen, you and Wu Li are locked together. You're not a good guy anyway, so don't let Wu Li out to harm other men. What are you thinking about? I'm thinking, how can there be such emotionally unstable people? At the same time, I'm also thinking that man whose girlfriend was stolen by Song Hao must be burning incense. He's truly lucky. Have you ever heard the saying? Birds of a feather flock together. One is emotionally unstable, like a bomb, and the other knowingly steals someone's girlfriend. They deserve to be together. What a perfect match. That's true. I pinched Wang Shui's nose and said, "You're not this kind of emotionally unstable person, are you? Don't play dumb. You think my parents and your parents asking people to inquire about us and our family backgrounds is a secret? My family also inquired about you and your family. Small towns are good for that. A little inquiry and everything is known." I smiled and didn't say anything because Wang Shui was telling the truth. My family also knew that her family had inquired about me and my family. A few months later, Wang Shui and I got engaged. The next year we got married. A year after our marriage, our precious daughter was born. However, within 6 months, Wang Shui was pregnant with our second child. What made me feel the happiest was that Wang Shui wasn't pretentious at all. Her emotions were even more stable than mine. I secretly vowed to be good to her and our children for the rest of my life, to shoulder the responsibilities of a man in the family, and to be the pillar of our home.